Coming up with the comic idea, part 1. If you take two popular series or general concepts and put them together, you'll create something new. For example, Dragon Ball Z meets Pirates of the Caribbean equals One Piece. Coming up with the comic idea, part 2. Take an already made story and then fundamentally change one thing about it. For example, change the island in Castaway to Mars, and you get The Martian. Same basic story, but different. Coming up with the comic idea, part 3. Take a past event from history or your own life and add an X factor to it. For example, if you take the civil rights movement and make it about superpowered mutants, you'll get X-Men. Comic writing tips, part 1. Once you have an idea, you have to be able to craft a story out of it. By knowing the 3-act structure, it becomes a lot easier. Check out this graph so you can learn how to form a beginning, middle, and end, and follow me so that way you can have more comic book making tips. Comic writing tips, part 2. Just like the 3-act structure graph, the Dan Harmon story circle can help guide you into creating a compelling story. The 8 steps in this graph can be found in pretty much every story, so apply it to your own and see what happens. Comic writing tips, part 3. Know your audience. Who are you making a story for? What types of stories do they like? How can you make a story that will entertain them? What's the message or lesson you want them to know? Knowing the answers to these questions can really help you craft ideas on how to tell them a story. So in the beginning stages of your next story's inception, think of this step. Character design tips, part 1. Use shapes. The most memorable and iconic characters are all created using shapes. The more mastery you have over this, the more recognizable your character will become. For example, here's one of my characters from my one-shot short story, Dragontooth. Character design tips, part 2. Exaggerate. Exaggerating character features can help your audience identify key traits about them. For example, this guy's massive shoulders and arms give an impression of strength. Try exaggerating character features, poses, and facial expressions to create a more memorable character. Character design tips, part 3. Color. The reason these characters are memorable is because of color theory. It can be difficult to learn, but once you know, it can be a lot easier to create a memorable character. You should want your character to be recognized by color alone, so practice using vibrant colors to make your character design better. Drawing backgrounds can be difficult. Here are a few tips to make it easier and more fun. 1. Think of it as being another character. Backgrounds can have different traits that stand out just like people. 2. Keep it simple. There's no need to stress yourself out. Only add detail when you feel you need to, and take your time if you do want to add some. And 3. Study real life. The more you study your surroundings, the more you can incorporate what you remember into your drawings. Hope this helped. Where can you publish your comic or story? Well, there are several different platforms, but here are a few recommendations that I have for you. There's Webtoons, Taptastic, your own social media accounts, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and you can even start your own blog. The only thing limiting you is you, so if you want to succeed, then just do it and don't give up. So you've written a comic and you want people to root for your character. This is how you do it. When you write your character, whether they're a reactive or proactive character, they should still go through several obstacles to block them from achieving their immediate and or long-term goals. After your character has been introduced, write them into and out of situations that seem unbeatable and impossible. The harder it is for your character to survive and overcome the obstacle, the more your readers and audience will root for them to succeed. The harder and more helpless the situation, the more your audience will start to like your character after they overcome it. Just a tip. Hope it helps. 3 tips on how to get better at drawing. Number 1, practice. It takes 10,000 bad drawings before you have your first good one. Draw every day as much as you can as practice. I suggest drawing fan art or something that keeps it fun for you if this seems tedious. Number 2, study life. Draw from reference. This is a great way to practice and learn how certain things are supposed to look. Number 3, do not give up. If you truly love drawing and want to get better at it, then you can't give up, because once you do, it's over. All in all, keep drawing. My process, part 1. Why and how I draw thumbnails. To demonstrate it from start to finish, I'll be drawing fan art of these scenes. Drawing thumbnails allows you time to draw and consider different compositions for a comic book page or illustration. They're small and sketchy, so it doesn't matter if they look good. As long as you can understand it to redraw bigger later, you're good. My process, part 2, will consist of tightening the pencils of this image, so stay tuned and follow for more. My process, part 2. Tightening pencils. Just like my last video, I'll be drawing fan art. When you tighten the pencils up, it clarifies what's going on. It makes things easier to see, so when it's time to ink the image, you won't have to struggle trying to make it look the way you want. This step is important because you can still erase and change things if you need to. So stay tuned for part 3 where I'll be inking this image, and follow for more. My process, part 3. Inking. Just like in my previous videos, I'll be inking fan art. When you ink your illustration or comic page, it does a couple of things. 1, it clarifies the image a little more. Clarity is very important, especially when it comes to comics. And 2, it can usually make the image look more dynamic and finished. The spot blacks and straight lines can really accentuate exactly what you're trying to convey. Inking isn't mandatory, but for me, it makes it easier to color. So don't miss part 4 when I use markers to color this image, and follow for more. My process, part 4. Coloring. Just like in my previous videos, I'll be coloring fan art. Coloring your image digitally or, in this case, traditionally can elevate your illustration or comic page. I feel that it completes the image I draw. This step isn't mandatory, but depending on what style of illustration you're going for, it can really help out. So thanks for watching this entire process. Next time you draw something, try thumbnailing it out, penciling it, inking it, and then coloring it if you don't already.